what is the difference between capitalism, socialism, communism, and Marxism?
Capitalism, socialism, and communism are alternative ways of organizing an economy. By economy, I simply mean the system we use to produce and distribute the goods and services we depend on for our lives. Our food, our clothing, our shelter, our transportation, all the things, the goods and services that make up a modern life. Those have to be produced, and then they have to be distributed so that we can consume them, whether it be a haircut or a hamburger or a software program or an automobile. Someone has to produce it, and it has to get from the producer to those of us who consume it. The capitalist system is like others in the history of the world because it organized the production in a remarkable way. It divided the people up in the production system into a minority and a majority. A small number of people who organize and run it, and a large number of people who do the work. In a way, people know this already. If you go back in history before today, you'll see that there were many systems set up like this. Slavery is a system where there is a small group of masters and a large group of slaves. The masters run the whole operation. The slaves do, if not all the work, the overwhelming bulk of the work. In feudalism, again, a small group, we call them the lords, supervise and control a very large group called the serfs. And they work in feudal manors and plantations to organize that work that way. Capitalism is like slavery and feudalism in that it organizes people into these two groups, one that runs the show and one that does the work. But unlike slavery, nobody is anybody else's property. And unlike feudalism, one of them isn't the guy who does everything in charge, and the worker is literally nothing. In capitalism, the small number of people who run the show are called employers, and the mass of the people who do the work are employees. And the way this works is the employees produce a ton of stuff, goods and services. A portion of that they get back. That's called the wage or the salary. The rest of what they produce, over and above what they get back to consume, is called the surplus, and it belongs to the employers. And they use the word profit to describe what's produced by their employees over and above what they have to give back to those employees and what they have to replace in the way of machines, tools and equipment, and so forth. What's the difference between that, socialism, and communism? Let's jump over to communism as, in a way, the furthest new, different kind of system. Communism, which I get from the leading thinker who pushed these ideas out, which is that Karl Marx. The idea is simple. You change the organization of production. You don't have a minority and a majority. You don't have masters or slaves. You don't have lords or serfs. And here's the big one. You don't have employers versus employees. Instead, you make the workplace a community. And by that we mean everybody is equal. And together we decide what we're going to produce, how we're going to produce it, where we're going to produce it, and how we're going to divide up that extra that we produce over and above what we take back as our individual consumer good pile. So it's a collectivization, if you like, the communization of the production process. It means that the workplace becomes a democracy, a place where everybody has an equal, one person, one vote influence on the decision. No more the owner of the business who's somebody else. No more the shareholders who are other people. No, the people who work there will together do the work of producing that good and that service. This is revolutionary. This is radical. This is a real break. It's more of a break with what went before than capitalism was relative to feudalism or slavery. Because while slavery was pushed aside and feudalism too, what capitalism did is hold on to that old division of a minority and a majority. Employer-employee isn't that big a move from lord and serf and master and slave, which is why modern employees often make the kind of sardonic joke, I'm a wage slave, because they understand the link there to something that went earlier. Socialism is in between. It isn't capitalism anymore, and in a certain way it isn't communism. It isn't communism because it hasn't yet gone, and maybe it never will, to the point where all the decisions are made democratically, collectively by all the workers. On the other hand, it isn't capitalism because it doesn't let the employer dictate everything to the employee. The socialist wants to limit what the employer can do to the employee. The socialist wants to protect the employees, the majority, from the profit-driven behavior of the employer. So socialists are the kind of people who push for a minimum wage, who are helpful to organize labor unions, who want to make sure that the environment is protected as capitalists make money. They don't dismantle the employer-employee, but they regulate it, and so they are as troubling to the capitalists as the communists are. The capitalists don't want limits on what they can do from the socialists, and they surely don't want to give up their power and strength in order to democratize the enterprise. And where does Marxism fit in? Marxism is a tradition of thought and action designed to go beyond capitalism and to move in the direction of socialism with an ultimate goal of getting to communism. Marx was the guy who figured out that capitalism, like every other system, is born, evolves over time, and then passes away. Slavery was born, evolved, and passed away. Feudalism was born, evolved, and passed away. Earlier economic systems were born, evolved, and passed away. Marx's argument was that capitalism is no different from any of them. It too was born, it too evolved. So the next stage, here comes the punchline, the next stage is it dies, it passes on.